I don't know how many of you out there have actually planned and successfully executed a high stakes heist, but hashtag relatable. Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. And of course, today we're going to be talking about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, or something like that. And I'm going to be a lot of bitter today, but really, this is something that I think that both the writing community and the reading community really needs to talk about, because I've just heard way too much of this sort of, I'll just call it what it is. It's kind of bullshit reviewing and bullshit reasons why writers choose to make characters certain ways, and that is this wonderful word called relatability. Relatability, in my opinion, is necessary, but it's really becoming a crutch for people who review books, who consume any sort of story media, and then also writers who are trying to make their characters better. Relatability is important. It's not that I'm trying to say that we should exclude relatability entirely. There is a psychology to the reasons why we like to see ourselves in certain roles. We like to see ourselves in the role of hero. We like to see our heroes portraying things that we believe to be right and true. But this also becomes a problem when we talk about things like diversity and own voices. And we'll get to that in just a sec, because we first need to really ground ourselves in what relatability is and what it isn't. And of course, as ever, I have notes because I can't keep anything straight in my head. This is why I'm a writer and not an orator. If you do a quick search on the internet as to what relatability is in terms of storytelling or writing or anything like that, essentially you'll come up with relatability is the extent to which a reader can relate to a character. That is a very broad term, but it is essentially what it is. But also talking about what it is not is very important. So it is not the reader's exposure to certain characters or archetypes. It's also not familiarity. It's not, okay, well, I'm familiar with this particular person in my life, or the circumstances surrounding a character are familiar to me, and thus it is entirely, this character is automatically relatable to me. They are also not exact replicas of the reader. That's just impossible to do, because your readership is going to extend far beyond what your character is. I read characters who identify as a different gender than I do, who identify as a different sexuality or a different culture, and who have lived in different times. You're never going to capture every particular reader in your character. It is also not sympathy for a character. It's not, oh, I feel bad for this character. This character is evoking so much emotion out of me, and thus I relate to them. That's not what relatability is. There are certain aspects which can impact relatability in that sympathy, but it is not entirely sympathy. What relatability is, or ends up being, is the belief that this character is a real person. As I've said before in the worst writing tips I've ever heard, that it's really not about relatability, it's about believability. You need to believe that I can go outside and accidentally meet this person, in real life or in this world, in this circumstance, and believe that what they're doing, how they're speaking, how they look, and their mannerisms and everything, I need to believe that those things are real in this context. It also goes into acknowledging the parts of myself are in the particular character that I'm reading about. So I'm never going to fully relate to a villain who's going against everything that I know, but I need to acknowledge that some part of me may have, at one point believed in this person, or that if I had allowed myself to indulge in that darker part of myself, that it might have grown into this villain, or I could imagine that the dark parts of a person could grow into a villain. It's also coming into understanding the circumstances surrounding the character. A great example of how not to do this is all those 80s and 90s teen movies where like everyone has a car and everyone has like a great apartment and everyone is, perfect and they have fashionable clothes and their makeup is always perfect. Like those are not realistic ideals, and it looks great if you're trying to live that fantasy, but that circumstance does not fit with everybody. And it makes the circumstances surrounding that character unbelievable, even if we suspend our disbelief in order to get to the story. So now that we've determined what it is and what it isn't, I need to talk about why it's become a crutch to so many writers and so many readers and reviewers. Relatability, again, is not immediately identifying with the character. It's not immediately taking their side. We have a lot of unreliable narrators. Look at Catcher in the Rye. We have narrators, main characters, who we really actually don't quite like. Like we might enjoy them, but we don't like them. But at the same time, we believe them. Further into that, relatability becomes a reason to dislike something when you really shouldn't be disliking it. I know several people who have, we've been discussing a book or a movie or a TV show or anything, and the quote has gone something like, I didn't like this story because I couldn't relate to the main character. And when I'm like, well, but if it's a writer, it's like, well, your main character does this and your main character does that. Or if it's a different reader, I'm like, well, the character did exactly this, this, and this that you liked in this other book. And if you go deeper into that, it becomes, well, it wasn't actually about relatability. It was because they didn't like the fact that it was a romance or it was an action story, or that the main character was of a different socioeconomic background, or they were of a different race. I've had someone say literally because the reader was female and the main character was male and they couldn't get into that headspace. And that's not good readership. You're not empathizing with the character because you have this prejudice against whatever this character is, rather than trying to either empathize with the character or take apart exactly what they're doing and taking them for their actions rather than their face value. What we should be looking at is this character believable? I keep saying it over and over and over. Creating a complex character, or even a flat character, a throwaway, nonsensical, whatever, if you make them believable, if you can believe that, the street urchin would be in this place at this particular time, or the thief is going to be extra smooth in trying to scope out their next hit, you can make those things believable without either taking away from the character or taking the reader out of the investment that they've already made into this character. They can be highly unrelatable and still very enjoyable. Six of Crows is actually a really good example of this, where we have so many people who have so many different traumas and situations and things that they are themselves dealing with. I will never relate to Kaz not liking to be touched. I will never relate to Inej in the way that I've never been sexually exploited for monetary benefit. Or Wylan, who has just the world's worst father, probably. I will never relate to these characters, but I believe in them and I love them, and I'm so wholeheartedly invested in their success because I believe them. I believe their truths. I believe their circumstances and who they are and what they identify with and what they love and what they hate. All the backstory to them makes them who they are, and all of their damages, even though I will never be able to fully step into that headspace, I believe that they have that headspace and they live that and they deal with it. And thus we have an amazing story about a diverse set of characters who go on a couple of crazy adventures and fall in and out of love. It's great. It's wonderful. But it's not relatable. I don't know how many of you out there have actually planned and successfully executed a high stakes heist, but hashtag relatable. Moving on from this is the only time I believe that relatability needs to take precedence and needs to be a factor, especially in the writing aspect of a story. And that is when you are writing literally any other character than what the writer themselves is. So if you're talking about a sexuality that is not your own, or if you're talking about a culture or a religion or political beliefs, or if you're writing a character that is of a lower or higher class than you are, these things need to be relatable to the people that are going to read these things. You know, if I were to try to write a book that heavily dealt with the Black Lives Matter movement, I would have to do so much research and talk to so many people and go through so many sensitivity readerships in order for me to get that right, so that the people who need that relatability, because I'm dealing with a very particular topic, those people get what they need. And I'm portraying this in the correct light, that I'm getting all the nuances that frankly I'm gonna miss because I know part of it, but I don't know the whole thing. Honestly, the reason why we have such a huge outpouring of support for own voices, because for far too long we have had writers who try their best for the time, I guess, but they get the culture wrong, or they get the religion wrong, or they use this otherness as something to be looked down upon, and they villainize the otherness of people. Honestly, even if I am Japanese American or half Japanese American, which makes this all more complicated, and if I were trying to write a book that was heavily Japanese, like Japanese from Japan, set in Japan, I would still have to do a ton of research because what I know is very limited. But if I'm going to try to capture a particular Japanese experience, even if it's just insofar as a character that's very important to the story, I'm gonna have to really try to make that character believable and relatable. If my Japanese character is believable, but for whatever reason I didn't quite get the details right and isn't relatable to Japanese people, I've not done enough research and I've done a disservice to that character. On the flip side as well, if I've made the character very relatable, but I haven't made the character believable to anyone outside of the culture, then I've also done the character disservice, because we are all human and we have very human experiences, and if I just make them a caricature of a culture or of a stereotype or something that we can immediately identify and relate to, but I don't make them human, I've only done half the job. That being said, us as readers, as reviewers, we don't always take those differences into account. A character can be infinitely relatable and not believable. And the same goes the other way. They can be entirely believable but not relatable. We don't differentiate because we've had this training from the time that we've been probably in middle school, high school, whatever, that we should be looking at relatability. And again, that even then in school, it was a crutch. Okay, class, what was your favorite character? It was so-and-so because I related to her. It has always been a shortcut, and we need to stop making it a shortcut. Relatability is so much more complex, as is believability, and they go hand in hand. Don't discount your relatability to a particular character for the believability that it brings. And on the same token, don't just say, I believe that this character would be true, without thinking about the more human aspects to the character. As a side note, the believability but not relatability factor is a big problem with villains, I find. If you believe a villain to have evil intent, that's fine. You can believe that because they're the villain. They're supposed to have evil intent. Or if you believe a villain would make certain choices, because logically that's how it is. But if you never bring in the human element to them, if you don't bring, not necessarily their trauma, because also that has become a crutch for a different video, but if you don't bring in the fact that they have reasons for doing such thing, or they are damaged in such a way that it is then believable that they would make these logical choices. If you don't make the reader really know their human side, then they sort of become cartoon characters. And I mean, that's fine if you want a cartoonish villain, twirly mustache and all, but for a more complex villain, for your more complex story, you kind of need to humanize them even a little bit, especially if they're going to have a big following. So I think that's all I have for you today, because I'm getting a little heated and I'm already like, I don't know, this will probably be like a 15-20 minute video anyway, so I think I'm good for now. But thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell down below if you haven't already, for better content than this. And always, as a reminder, I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers, and once we hit that, I will be doing a giveaway. So share this video, share other videos that you have liked. It'll be a hardcover or paperback delivered by Amazon. Details in the description below. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Alright, bye!